Hey, it is Dr. Turan, Dr. Shanae Turan of SP Consulting Group. I'm your organizational development psychologist, as well as your licensed clinical social work therapist and executive wellness strategist, executive leadership strategist, where I combine that intersection of the theories behind organizational change and leadership, management, development as it pertains to really making sure that as leaders, we come from a servant leader standpoint so that we can get actual sustainable results and not just focus on all things theoretical. Let's put it into practice. So, what we have been doing lately is talking about leadership in all the different ways. There's leadership tips on TikTok that I share from time to time on Facebook and Instagram. And here we are diving in a little bit deeper into credibility as a leader. There's so much that is going on in the world. There is so much that is beyond even from a spiritual standpoint, being a faith-based leader in myself, that is going on that requires those of us that are in positions of leadership, whether formally or informally, that we are making a point to say, hey, as a leader, not only are we going to be bold in what it is that we're doing so that we can lead effective and I would say faith-based strategies, those that have high moral, ethical standards, all the ways that you can describe being credible, being someone that can be trustworthy, being someone who understands, as we had talked about last week, that leadership is about relationship and truly making sure that we are cultivating and I would say grooming ourselves and allowing ourselves to be in the position to truly trigger positive results. There's a lot of negative things going on. So I'm like trying to help you guys see why we're going in this direction. We are using the book, as I shared, Credibility, How Leaders Gain and Lose It and Why People Demand It. We've been going from that standpoint because, again, as I've shared before, this is one of the books that was used throughout my doctoral research and training in organizational development psychology. So, with an emphasis on leadership development, it really made an impact and an impression on me to recognize the opportunities we have to truly lead in a way that is in honesty and in truth, because a lot of people are depending on and wanting to see leaders that they can trust, that they can depend on, that if they go to you, depending on your niche and the area that you oversee in your business, your target audience, that they receive what it is that they are looking for, and that you are passionate about what you're doing so that you can, again, lead sustainable results, lead transformation, lead in ways that bring about restoration for those that are in need in whatever way that may be, whatever niche, whatever industry, that we're working with. So this week, we're looking at the characteristics of an admired leader, the characteristics of admired leaders. And most of the categories fit into three areas, and that's integrity, competence, and leadership. And of course, since we're talking about leadership is broad. But when we are talking about leading from a place of relationship, we have to say, well, in a relationship, there's usually a give and a take that organically happens. And so in that space of leading from a standpoint of relationship and knowing what it is that people are looking for, we have to come to a place where we understand that integrity is really about what's done when no one's looking. Competence is really about what you are studying and equipping yourself to provide adequately and in a best practice sort of way when no one's looking. All of this is sort of behind the scenes. Leadership is the part where what you've done behind the scenes shows up in front. Like, what is it that people see? The outcomes of the work that you do behind the scenes. And I have to say, if I use myself as an example, there's a lot of things that people don't know that I do behind the scenes to make sure that I can show up, to make sure that I am consistent. And again, I always share, and a lot of the experts will share, consistency isn't about every day. It's about you continuing to do what it is that you said that you were doing and having the influence in the areas in which you said you were leading, right? Like, consistency. There isn't a bunch of back and forth, a lot of confusion about what you do, who you are. You know, I have forever and ever been an organizational development psychologist, licensed clinical social work therapist, and leadership strategist, you know, leadership wellness strategist, you know, really combining those two worlds of the psychology of the mind and the psychology of an organization, and how do we really match them and really refine how we operate. That's what I've been doing in one way or another as a faith-based leader. So you're going to always hear me say, because I'm talking about integrity and competence, you're going to always hear me say that there's a great opportunity at that intersection of mind, body, and spirit wellness. Mentally well, physically well, spiritually well. All of those areas really support and grow what it is that we're talking about when we're talking about the ability to have a baseline of well-being, not stress, not diluting your impact. And so as we're talking about leadership as a relationship and bringing it on to today, as far as what is it that people are looking for, you have to understand that what you give has to be aligned with what someone needs. So if you are looking at, let's see, this book breaks it down and it talks about, and I have it written down, being honest, forward thinking, or looking forward to being able to forecast what's going on so that you can help people prepare accordingly and not just leave them hanging. That's what plans are for. That's what roadmaps are for. Strategic plans are for. All of those things are to have your hand always at the helm of what's to come so that we can prepare in advance. That's where some of you may have heard of me talking about having a post-mortem analysis, usually, or it's a pre-mortem analysis. Either way, and I'm going to describe it exactly, and you guys can, and I always encourage you to do your research as well so that you can get a better understanding, because these clips are small. But what you're doing is saying that if something were to not work out, and in this sense, the mortem part is if your plans were to die, if your vision were to die, what will be the reason why? And then you plan accordingly to prevent that from happening. That's another tool that you actually can use when we're talking about foresight. Honesty is honesty, but also transparency, you know, and I think that goes hand in hand, because then people can trust that what you're saying is real. What you're saying isn't just a dog and pony show because of the bottom line that you want to hire them. It's or you want them to hire you. What is it that you're doing that is done in honesty and in truth? You know, that's necessary. And being able to inspire. What are you inspiring people to do? My goal is to inspire people to be bold, faith-based leaders. And in that boldness, there's layers to it. How can you be bold if you're still dealing with imposter syndrome, for instance? How can you be bold if you don't have the tools and the business acumen to actually execute business development, growth, sustainability? You know, how can you do that if you don't have the tools? How can you then walk boldly into a room and speak if you are scared to do public speaking? You know, how can you really be successful and inspire others if you don't even have values and inspirations yourself? You know, what are you inspiring to do? What are you hoping to see? What is your vision? How do you live out your mission and vision statement of your business, for example? And competence, like I said, is doing the background work, self-study, certification programs to help you be equipped, trainings, regular professional development, things that you're doing, but essentially being consistent over time is embedded in all of those avenues. How you're preparing yourself, how you're ensuring the integrity, how you are maintaining the relationship that you are to have. And I want to stay in that pocket of relationship, because when you're in a, say, intimate partnership, as most people are most familiar with, when it comes down to it, are you honest? Do you make goals? Do you have plans? That's forward thinking, like, do you have sort of a moment or a regular routine of touching bases with the person? How are we doing? Like, what's going on? How was your day? Moments like that. As far as in a healthy relationship, think of healthy relationship. What you do, you build trust over time. You don't do things that would compromise your integrity, and you make sure that if you're not well at doing something, that you get help in doing well. That's why people sometimes go to couples counseling or marriage therapy or premarital therapy, premarital counseling, whatever it's called. But it's, what are we doing on purpose to spend time with each other? What are you doing on purpose to spend time with people that you want to serve? Is it always about the bottom line dollar and what you were paid, or do you go and offer in-kind services to support pro bono service provisions that you give? What is it that you do? But bringing it back to relationship as a leader, it's, how can you purposely attend to these areas? If the research is saying out of all of the different traits, they fall within 3 areas: integrity, competence, and your ability to lead, not, and I want to say this because it's an example of that I have of where people say that they're a leader, but they're really a manager. They just manage tasks, but they don't lead the charge. They don't lead with a shared vision. They don't include people in the conversation. They just say, here's the directive, go with it. That's not necessarily leadership. That might be management, but there is a difference. And so we're going to stay in this pocket of what is it that people consider characteristics of an admired leader, or what do they look for in a leader? We're going to stay here a little bit, because in order for you to know how to maintain, sustain, and grow in that space of leadership and being a bold leader and stepping out as amongst maybe few, that is a leader of integrity that does things keeping people in mind, it's going to be hard for you to find a space in this very ever-changing climate, this very toxic workforce environment, the world, the country. There's a lot of things going on, and we have to really pivot ourselves, if you are taking this opportunity, to really align yourselves on the right side of history by making sure that your staff, that your that the people that you lead, because it may not be staff per se, but the people that you lead, it may be in ministry, it may be in other ways. You're leading your target customer base, that they can depend on you, and you're one less person that they have to worry about in a position of leadership. Because right now, the nuances of leadership is being tainted because of the ways in which those that we had expectations for, as far as being a leader of integrity, that is being compromised. And so then we can be very unsure. And I want to again share this quote, because I thought this was very, very impactful, and I just want to share it again. This is in the book, and I'm going to read it verbatim. It says, this is from John Gardner, and I'm going to find other quotes and things to put in there, as well as scripture that supports this. But it says, a loyal constituency is one when the people consciously or unconsciously judge the leader to be capable of solving their problems and meeting their needs. When the leader is seen as symbolizing their norms, and when their image of their leader, whether or not it is corresponds with reality. So it's their idea, whether it corresponds with reality or not. What did they see? Whether or not that corresponds, is congruent with their inner environment, is what leads them to then follow. So this is something that really sticks home with how I'm going to close it today, as far as credibility, looking at relationship, but knowing what it is that people are looking for. That is something that is important in traditional relationships. What are you looking for, and does it align with what it is that I have to give and what I'm also looking for? People view things the same way when it comes down to leadership. So if you're leading a business, you're leading an organization, consider this and consider ways that maybe if you need help in this area, reach out to me. I'm Dr. Shanae Turan of SP Consulting Group, your organizational development psychologist, as well as licensed clinical social work therapist and executive wellness strategist. And I look at leadership from this place of not just therapy or theory. It's how do we combine them with some practical steps. So let's continue to work on this, evaluate ourselves. This is a moment of self-reflection. How do we position ourselves as separate from leaders that are not really showing as much integrity as you would prefer? And the trust is at the brink. Okay, so how do you do that? Self-reflect, and let's keep this going. And I will see you guys next week. Okay, you guys take care. Be blessed. Bye for now.